Hello, this is Etude number 3 by Kohler from the Etudes of Expression. Somebody asked me to do a practice video and give us some tips on how I would approach this study. So that's what we're going to do. Basically just breaking it down, trying to make sense of all the little bits and pieces in this study and how they all link together and how to practice them in an efficient way. So what I like to do first is find the skeleton or outline of any melody or melodic passage. So if we look at the beginning, this first big section, we've got ABA structure throughout, and this first section, every phrase, almost every phrase, begins on the second quaver or eighth note. So we have a quaver rest at the beginning, and that gives us a sense of propelling forward, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, all the time through those particular passages. And so, yes, the dynamics are written underneath the second quaver. Where they're not written under the second quaver in this first section, I would wonder why. Perhaps he wanted a sudden dynamic change on the first beat, but I think it might just be slightly the addition here where the dynamic really should just be under the second quaver. So just question that when you get to those. There's only a couple of them, just because I think it's the continuity of where he's placed all the dynamics. So the first bit we have, if we play the top note, the top notes, we can see that it's a descending line, but we have a repeated note in the middle. So it's not always going downwards. So just be careful of that repeated note, and that's something that you can actually latch on to. So we have that 2, 3, 4, 1. We aim for that in the middle of the bar there where we have the repeated D. And then 2, 3, 4, 1. We get to the downbeat. Okay, so practice that again. Just finding that and then join that up. So we find that it's quite a nice jolly descending line there, and that's further enhanced by this articulation that he's written. So we've got two forms of slurred in twos. We've got the conventional one, and then we've got the syncopated one in the second bar. So it's actually providing us with a way to practice these intervals as well. So we can practice them like in the first bar from the high note downwards, where we have fourths and thirds. And then in the second bar we can practice it from the lower note upwards, where the intervals tend to be a little closer together. So let's do the first one. And then the second one. Okay, so we have those two, and just with the slurring in twos, just be careful not to cut the second note of the slur. So just think of them as little diminuendos, so that the first note of the slur is slightly more, but try not to cut the sound with the tongue. And then we get this kind of bouncy feeling as well when we have this little, it's not an accent, but it's this little diminuendo from each slur. And that will help us propel forward to the next bar. these dynamic contrasts, so from the third bar. So that's just a chance to practice dynamics there. And then we get the same kind of melody throughout the section, but in different keys. This time starting on an E, we have it on D as well, etc. Where we have the mezzo forte on the C sharp. We can think of that as just, to break that down, it's just descending thirds. And then rising third. Okay, so that's quite easy to latch onto, is that higher line where we've got the thirds. The lower part of that, it's still nice, but it's not as obvious. Okay, so you could think of either, but I prefer the top one. Okay, and that's like that in the next couple of bars too. Where's the next bit? Yes, where we have this, a couple bars after, a few bars later. The way it's written, it's difficult to see the pattern, but if you start from the B, we notice that there's just simply triads descending. Okay, so we can practice it just like that, and that gets the fingers used to that pattern. Then put the stress patterns back so that we have that first beat of each group there, so each beat has a bit of a stress rather than just the top note. So that's what we want to latch onto there, just so that it doesn't sound like triplets. Okay, so and then when you speed that up and don't show it as much, but just feel that, then we still get a sense of the meter. And then just be careful there, it goes on to a D sharp, not a C sharp that we might expect. Where this new little bit starts, and this looks tricky, but actually if you bring the top note down an octave, we'll find that it's just chromatic thirds, chromatic minor thirds, I think. So that's all that is really. So if you practice chromatic thirds in your daily scale practice, which I used to do, not so much anymore, I should, then that will become easier, and then you just put those notes back up. And just practice it slowly and getting quicker a little bit each day. Okay, then we have this little nice interlude, delicata, and this is where I think the piano should start from the second quaver, because he's written it on the first quaver, and I don't think it needs to be on that. It feels like that's where the phrase is leading, so it shouldn't be a subito piano. So if we think of it from the second quaver, and there's not not too much to really think about here. It's just nice and smooth and legato. Just think about those octaves, don't push for them. Don't get louder on them. So use the lower note, increase the air speed, and think of the direction going up. And aim for the next note actually. So there's always an element of phrasing forward. And then it's back to the slurred in twos, this time on a C. Another confusing dynamic marking is just towards the end of this first big section, where we have dim ed allagando. And he's suddenly put a forte on the first beat. And I think having the forte on the first beat is good, but I think use those chromatic notes with a little crescendo towards it would make more sense. So we really arrive at this new section. And this is slower, moderato. The first section is allegro spiritoso. So the moderato can have a little bit more, it says con grazia as well, so grace. Yeah, and I think just keep the feeling light, but it's got a broad dynamic as well. So it's very cheerful and elegant. And then we have something different coming with this staccato, and I think these are quite sort of searching. The harmony's a bit uncertain. It's light, easy, free, and the staccato I think a little bit longer than, not dry basically. So we don't want not too sort of tonguey. So something a bit more expressive and haunting almost, before it launches back. Back into that section. And then he goes, we've got a nice diminuendo and ral, and then he does put a crescendo here. All that stuff again. So that says to me that really that last section should have had a crescendo too, but that's debatable, I suppose. Then it's all pretty much like the beginning. Where does it get different? Just about 4 lines towards the end. We've got slightly different harmonies there. So those bits, just to watch out, because it's not quite as it was at the beginning. So it's staying in the tonic, back in G major. And then we just bring out these lower accents. Okay, so that's just at the end there, the little coda. And just a little flourish at the end. So I hope that helps make sense of all of that and giving you some ideas on practicing.